Welcome to Disrupt You. This is the show where we'll hear what changes are headed to colleges and universities in all departments. We'll learn what innovation really means in higher education.
Welcome back to Disrupt You. How are you, Dustin?
I'm not Dustin. I'm Aaron Rodgers. And you know what? I actually talked with Joe Rogan. I got some advice from Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan said we're all living in a simulation, and it doesn't matter what the future of higher education looks like. So why are we even having this conversation?
I don't know. Is that like Truman Show kind of thing? Like, is that where we're going back? I don't know. That's very Matrixy of you to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We got a great interview today, and I want to hear your thoughts real quick. So,
okay, let's hear it.
You're following the Travis Scott tragedy, right, with this concert, which made me think about crisis communication. In higher education, what should schools, universities keep in mind for crisis? How should they be thinking about a crisis and planning for crisis communication? Because it's going to happen someday. So what's your thoughts?
So I think clear communication is key to any crisis management. It's so key. So for me, it's knowing your data and knowing it really well, because it's really easy to say, oh, I need to email everyone. But the reality is you probably need different messages for different segments of your population. And if that's not easy to pull that list really quick and get those messages out, you're gonna be killing time. Or you're gonna have to send a message that's like, if this, then this, then this, then this, and it just gets cumbersome. So for me, it's about setting up the framework for really clear communication. That's my hot take, if you will.
So how can you get this specific dorm and that specific dorm, right?
Yeah, but that's so that you can get the right message to the right people. I mean, clear and non-confusing communication in crisis is so critical. You don't need to be reading through what everyone else needs to do. You need to be doing what you need to do. And clean and clear data is the way to go. So get your data clean, get your list all tightened up.
I love that. Clear, clean data is essential. I think on the top of that is have that black box, right? Digital black box of every crisis that could happen. At your school, a lot of stuff can happen. You could have rampant cheating through athletics. You could have your president of your school DUI. You could have a high vocal faculty member do something. There's a lot of stuff could happen. So ask yourself, bring your crisis team together and plan out, if this happened, what would we do? We'd go to the data.
Yeah.
We'd reach out, right? Have those general plans beforehand so you can move as quick as possible, right? In 2021, people aren't willing to wait a week to hear from you. They're willing to wait 60 seconds to hear from you, right?
To 5 minutes. That's your time frame. Like you've got minutes, seconds, all right, not days. So perfect.
If you're a school that has Travis Scott penciled in to come perform at your school, you may want to get that eraser out.
I actually had him at my block party.
Is that right?
So
is that right?
Might need to rethink that.
All right, Erin, what are we getting into today?
Well, I'm really excited. We've got a guest. We've worked with him a little bit, but I don't think we've really sat down and talked innovation, which is his kind of niche. And so I'm really excited. We got Bill O'Connor today, and I'm excited to bring him on. Okay, so let's welcome our guest, Bill. Bill O'Connor, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about him, and then we're just going to jump into some questions. So Bill's the founding partner of Agents of Innovation. It's an innovation consultancy based in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. He's also a faculty at Singularity University, and he's an advisor to leading AI digital people company, which is Soul Machines, which we are very familiar to. Over the past 10 years, Bill has conducted 600 plus innovation engagements with so many companies, over 250, including Google, Apple, Tesla, Nike, Airbnb, Starbucks, and that's just naming a couple, from over 50 countries, working with 8,000 professionals and more than 4,000 executives and C-staff and over 25 CEOs. So Bill knows innovation, and we're excited to talk about it with him today. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you so much. Great introduction and good energy. I'm feeling the vibe. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's get started. And most of our listeners are in higher ed and work at universities or colleges. How do people get started in innovation in terms of in higher ed? What's the best way to start? How do you get started?
I would put it this way. This is a maxim I came up with a while back. So it's like, to me, innovation can be defined in a bunch of ways. One way to define it is innovation is when you understand someone or some audience, you care about them, and you imagine on their behalf. That's what innovation is. Innovation is not saying like lean and agile. Like I always say, if Steve Jobs had come to me in 2005 and said, Bill, we want to do a revolutionary phone, what should we do? I would say, I don't know, could you make a less crappy BlackBerry? Like I wasn't spending time on the phone. So he imagined on all of our behalfs about what amazing thing. And by the way, this is a corollary, is innovation is not, necessity is not the mother of invention or innovation. Most innovations we don't need. This is relevant to higher education. I mean, like I always say, remember the great iPhone shortage of the 1970s? Remember how terrible that was? We didn't have iPhones. No one needs an iPhone. No one needs electric light or the printing press. Innovation is mostly just imagining on people's behalf and saying, wouldn't this be great? Now that education has a built-in advantage there, because most people I've known in education, usually pretty good people, imagine on behalf of the kids, right? So I would say this, as look, there's always a status quo versus status novo, right? The term for the new. There's always that dynamic. But this is what I say in the education realm, like in the business realm, not all executives love the customers. So when I say imagine on their behalf, when I say you should care about your customers, some companies get that. And some companies are like, are you crazy? This is an economic transaction. So I would say where I would start is, assuming you care about the kids or the learners, right, of any age, imagining on their behalf, that's what you do if you care. So that's the start. That's the start of innovation. It really starts in some ways as an emotional thing, and you build on it with the imagination. But that's a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, and
makes sense.
Go ahead.
I think one exercise that I'd love to hear your thoughts, and Erin, your things. I've done this before in innovation. Of you go through the day of your customer or your student, where you wake up, what do you do, right? You go, what do you at lunchtime? What's going on at lunchtime? What's going on in your evening? How do you go to sleep, right? What's different in the eyes, not as a faculty member or as a CEO, right? It's through their day, and write that out specifically. It kind of helps get in that mode, right?
Yep. My wife years did ethnography, where you literally follow people around like Jane Goodall with the chimps, except the chimps are humans. So yeah, I agree. That's a part of understanding. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, that's that understanding.
Yeah, I had an insight as you were talking, in that colleges and universities, for the most part, have been serving such a traditional population for so long. Yeah. With some exception. But that has kind of been turned on its head, I think, in the last definitely 5 to 10 years. I mean, definitely in the last, 5 years. So it almost makes me think it's not that we're not innovating, it's that we're not expanding who we care about. Like we have to, we are still thinking about who we cared about 50, 100 years ago. It's like, no, who we care about looks so totally different. Why it's so important to know your student.
Learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah. Well, actually, then I'll add something. Yeah, I'll add something to my understand, care about, and imagine on behalf. Identify them, right? So I think you're saying, the circle of care. I feel like it's the Lion King. Can you feel the love tonight? I don't know about that circle of life. I don't know what I'm talking about. But the circle of care, if it should expand, then actually that is a spur to innovation. Because you're right. If it's like kids from 18 to 22, that's it. Mostly, back in the day, wealthier people, et cetera, probably mostly white, et cetera. If all that is changing, you're right. It's incumbent upon educators to change. But also if they have that care, if somebody comes into their ambit or their orbit that's just different, of course they should naturally think, all right, how can we serve them? And I know we're all preaching to the mutually converted, because Maryville, I think, is relatively in sync with what we're talking about, right? I mean, obviously, yeah.
So in a sub question then is, who should or can be involved in innovation? And I think you're going to say everyone, but how does that happen?
Yeah, I'm not one of those people. If you want a hot take, no, it's one of my problems with design thinking. And that a lot of that came out of Stanford and IDEO. And again, to quote my wife again, also this research company called Cheskin Research that Also did a lot of early stuff that sort of merged into design thinking. Design thinking, look, on the side point, design thinking does not lead to innovation a lot. There's a hot take for you, it just doesn't. Design thinking is a lot about the how. We already know what the what is. How do we make it better, nicer, et cetera? It's adjectival instead of related to the noun. No, I don't. I think of it this way. And again, this is all drawn from the field, having done with work hundreds of companies. I'll do concentric circles. Who should innovate? First, you need the leader of the organization to be innovative, or at least not against it. Without that, you can basically go home, because even with that, it's really tough. Then the second level would be people in innovation groups who often don't innovate anyway. But look, if you want likely suspects, people in innovation groups, innovation teams, the chief innovation officer, right? Of course, that's their job. The third group I will call the wounded gunslingers, the innovation outlaws. I always say this, they've got scars, hopefully mostly psychic, not real. But anywhere you go, when an innovative company, you meet this level 3 person, and this is what they're. So you could go and say, "Hey, you work at Tesla. How is it?" And they go, "It is tough, man. It's tough to innovate here." And they look down, and there's been some trauma, right? Those people should be innovating, because they're either about to quit the company because they're exhausted from being pummeled by the status quo, right? So those people. That's why I tell executives, especially CEOs, find that person that annoys you a little bit in the meeting. You're always like, "Oh God, why does she bring this up again? She brought quantum up again." It's that person that exhausts you. That person should be innovating, because they're going to leave if you don't, probably. So that's sort of the third level. And the fourth level, I would say, is people who they're not that Teddy Roosevelt in the ring right now. They're not fighting the fight. But my God, they have good ideas, and they're creative, and they're close to the customer, and they know what to do. So that fourth ring would be potential innovators. 3 would be wounded innovators. So when the culture increases, those people stop feeling as much pain. And level 4 gets the sense of, "Oh my God, I've always had these ideas. There's actually some sort of a mechanism," right? I would sort of much stop it there. And look, theoretically, anyone in the company could join that fourth ring. But, out of, I don't know, if there's 10,000 employees in a company, rings 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, that's like 200 people maybe. So I do say anyone should be allowed to try to innovate, but everyone needs to be an innovator? No. Everyone can be an innovator? Maybe theoretically, not really, So it's not as kumbaya as the design thinking people would have. Hot take.
Hot take. Thanks.
I'm just going to say hot take after every take, and then maybe I'll convince you it's a hot take.
Okay.
I agree with that. I feel the same way. The academic way is always like, okay, the group gets up there and you all present 25%. It's a 4-person group. You all just pick the person who presents the best. Right?
It's not participation trophy for everyone. No, but look, the thing is, though, the part of that is true, as you guys know, is creating that environment where anyone can contribute an idea. Yeah, that's good. I mean, I was an early advocate of open innovation, which has not really taken off a lot. But, obviously the best companies do allow people to contribute. But man, look, having studied 350 actual innovations going back, 3.5 million years, when you look at what actually happened beyond the theory, it's often 1 or 2 crazy people who have imagined on the behalf of a certain set of people. And often they have people helping them, et cetera. But it is not usually the team stuff that a team doesn't have a collective vision usually. That's different, So I've always joked about COI, culture of innovation. I've always said, I say to my audiences, does everyone think culture of innovation is important? Raise your hand. And they all raise their hand. And then I say, okay, now let me ask you this. And I'll call on you if you raise your hand. Who's ever seen a culture of innovation? Nobody raises their hand. And I do the trick question did Apple have a culture of innovation? It was an innovative company, and everybody raises their hand. And I just go, no, you're wrong. Jobs was innovative and visionary. 2 or 3 people around him, like Rubenstein, Johnny Ives, and everyone else was executional, right? And by the way, I do that because working with executives, they're the most pampered people in the world. My goal is to throw them off their game with a couple of sharp boxes to the head. You got to get these people feeling wrong for the first 10 minutes and confused, then I could maybe teach them some of what I know, right? But that's a good way to do it. It's like, was Apple innovative? Yeah, it was. No, it was not. So anyway, yeah, I'll wrap it up by saying, in a healthy organization, just what will happen in a really healthy organization, you have a much wider group of people innovating than usual. But does it ever go past 10%? I don't know. I honestly doubt it. It could, but I doubt it. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, Bill, I'd love to ask you a question, and you can keep the name of the organization out of the answer. But can you tell us one mistake, a failure some organization has had when they were trying to be innovative? They were trying to go down that path, and
the Segway. I'll just say the name, the Segway.
Okay.
Yeah, remember that, the Segway?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why.
Motorized little vehicle,
motorized scooter. Now it's widely.
They still use that as a target for the security guards. I've seen them.
Yeah, no, they're still here. So what's the short part of that? I got to stop quoting my wife here. Anyway, somebody that I know very closely worked on the Segway in the early days. That's all I'm going to say about that, because I could give you my opinion. The Segway is a great example because Steve Jobs was saying, it was codenamed Ginger. I don't know if you remember that. And Steve Jobs was, is that, are you a ginger? There you go.
Yeah, I like it already. I like it.
There we go. Yeah. I usually think that's a British term, but yeah, it's an international ginger thing, right? Yeah. The thing was called ginger. It's even Steve Jobs was saying, this is going to change the basic economics of cities. And for a while, everybody, at least in my circles, thought it was probably some sort of a flying thing, like a drone, like you knew it was bringing you somewhere. And then it came out, and it's like, this is an example. It's like he had the great idea with the basic mechanism of going back and forth, but the failures are, let's name them, right? You look like a dork, right? Hey, back in the day, where do you keep stuff? Oh, they didn't really think of that. What if it rains, jackass? Like, okay, what do you do then? How do you charge it? Because I guess back then there were charging stations everywhere. No, they were not. And the fact that it went something like 12 to 16 miles an hour, they thought it would be a sweet spot. It's more like, in cinema, the uncanny valley, where it's like things just look a little weird. It's not like South Park, where it looks completely fake and it's completely believable. And it's not Avatar. I think this was in the uncanny valley of speed. Do you ever see a Segway going? You're always like, wait a minute, is it too fast? Is it too, like, it doesn't, it didn't fit the economics. It didn't change everything, And Dean Kamen, brilliant guy. He also invented that wheelchair that goes up. Have you seen that? Because people in wheelchairs, they don't, you look down at them literally. You can almost cry looking at it. The wheelchair goes, he's a genius. But so what he did was an invention. He did not do an innovation. My definition, bringing it to the world. He brought it to the world, and it did not make a big difference. It exists, and they're kind of cool, right, in some ways. But it got maybe 1% of the impact on the world that people thought it would have. I guess that's an example. And by the way, I could give you like a million other examples of, like, the Palm Pilot before the iPhone, like before the thing that's the innovative thing. There's usually some precursors. Like before Facebook, what was it? There was 6 Degrees, and everyone knows MySpace, pets.com. Like there's a million things that failed because they were too early, or they're not the right business model. The world wasn't ready for it. But I just like the Segway because, man, that was greatness was within grasp, I think, Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
First out of the gate are rarely the winners, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it coming out of the gate so brutal, Yeah. Mm-hmm. Does that answer it? I think that's an example, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to shift just a little bit into the space that I know you work with, in terms, especially with soul machines, around digital humans. Yeah. So this idea of a digital human, how do you think that role of a digital human will impact higher education?
Well, I absolutely think, so I think the term digital workforce is a term that I like, right? So if you're a researcher somewhere, if you're a writer, and you higher ed as well, the short answer is you will have digital people working alongside human people, right? I actually, what's the term I like? I actually like the term AI people or AI avatar better. When the world hears digital people, they go, yes, everyone's a digital person will work digitally these days. So it doesn't quite have the ring to it. So again, I know this is tricky in terms of like integrating this, but I'll give you an example. So I've lectured a lot at different universities, right? And I've been part of Singularity University, right? So, X years from now, there will be absolutely a digital twin of Bill O'Connor, right? So let's think about a professor. I think enlightened professors will augment their own capabilities with, it could be digital twins or digital assistants, however it works, right? And what will that be for? Well, how about infinite office hours? That sounds pretty good, right? How about never forgetting anything? How about being able to talk forever? I picture, so I, as a literature major, I liked, like most people, a lot of things, Walt Whitman, James Joyce, etc. When we did the first page of Ulysses, James Joyce, I remember, it took an entire seminar class, right? Because that first page is so lunatic. But then the professor had to go. Like, I know if there was a digital, like, Irish literature professor around them, and I could just call him or her up, I would have talked about that for much longer. You know what I mean? Scaling it, right? Or that's sort of at a higher level at university, but like, you're a fifth grade kid, and regular education, and you can't get the thing, you can work with the tutor infinitely, right? So I think that what the answer is basically augmented performance, right? I don't it's a specious dichotomy to say like either I'm the professor or I'm replaced by this. No, it's technology usually augments us, right? So that's what I think. And by the way, that at the micro level, each educator, now also the head of a university, right? I'll give you an example. So I went to Franklin and Marshall College. The president of Franklin and Marshall now runs Aspen Institute, right? Now that I think of it, he was not a lecturer, but he should absolutely have a digital twin because he's given speeches all over the place, right? So that's sort of at the high level that like the practitioners should use this to augment. But the bigger picture is how many people on earth right now would like higher education, can't get it because of access, right? What digital people will do and digital workforces will scale that, And so again, I'm a literature major, but I also love business, right? Like, I could easily record a course without any prep, actually. That's like the 25 great business books of all time, right? And I could just record it, and you create a digital me doing it, put it out there, and then a poor person from anywhere who's 17, they read it and they can just talk to me about it. I'd like to do that. So there's an effective and efficiency side of this for each practitioners, but there's also an ethical, altruistic side that digital people in every realm will scale. In the medical world, it will scale care. In the education world, so is that what you're going for? I think it's going to be a major boon at some point.
Yeah, I think that helps and is really intertwined in some of the things we've been talking about in the last few episodes. So
yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah. Dustin just wants to know when they're going to grade for him.
Yeah, I want to know when those things do my grading.
It's absolutely coming. I mean, objective grading is probably closer, of course. Subjective, this is the thing for people used to say, well, they'll never be able to be like subjective. Yeah, they will. So yeah, my answer is the first is objective grading is coming soon. The other is coming later.
Bill, better question. When can I get a digital human to laugh at all my jokes? Because I make jokes on this podcast. Erin doesn't laugh at any of them. So I'm wondering.
Dude, you got to talk to soul machines. You need a lackey. You need a digital lackey.
I'll put in my request.
Yes.
Okay. So we're talking about digital humans. I want to ask you a question. We're in Vegas. Are you a Vegas guy at all?
I used to go when I worked at Autodesk. I went every year for our massive conference. So yeah, I know Vegas very well.
Okay. We're going to Vegas. I'm giving, you got all your chips.
Okay.
What are you betting on specifically? What tool are you betting on putting all your chips on one thing? Give me something that's a little less not so obvious, like AI. Obviously, AI will affect it. Give me something people aren't talking about as much that you're a little bullish on.
Okay, so let me see. So beyond the conventional wisdom, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, AI and metaverse are in there. well, I'll give you two things. I'll give you things that are further out and things that are sort of further weird and to the side, right?
I love it.
Further out is mind machine interfaces. Absolutely going to happen. And again, I'm such a nerd that I don't even know that that's not off the beaten path. It will happen, I think, right? It's happening now. That's one thing. People can play video games. People can edit documents with their mind. And that's going to absolutely integrate with the metaverse. So that's one thing that's kind of further out. I think people are sleeping on quantum mechanics and quantum computing. Again, that's further out. Certain people are thinking about it. I mean, that's going to destroy lots of encryption and security basics. There are even criminal gangs that are downloading data now, they said, and storing it in the expectation that when quantum comes, they'll be able to decode all of it. I was like, oh, those crafty criminals, right? I'm trying to think of something that's a little weird. I guess my mind went to collective thinking. Like, here's an example. You could, when there was a computer, you could picture like a handheld computer at some point. What I didn't picture anyway until Twitter was, oh, right. You're going to limit essentially blog posts to a really short amount. And then that's going to be a thing, right? So in a similar way, I would say, and this is also a project I've been working on forever. It's the idea of capturing the invisible architecture of a conversation. Because right now in the political realm, we cannot talk to each other. We just talk past each other. And ever since I was like maybe in my 20s, when people would argue, I don't know if you can see my eyes, and if people would disagree, I'd see the whole thing and I would go, it's like, do you know those giant diagrams? They show water flow in a whenever the power of water goes out, they say, here we are in the room, and there's a giant diagram. That's how I view conversations, right? So that's just one example. I think the stuff that fits the bill of stuff people aren't thinking about, I'll do a subcategory of things that don't exist right now. Like the term skeuomorphic, which is like something taking some, like skeuomorphic is, hey, we have a film camera now. I know, let's go to a play and record it. You're not using the full thing. You're taking the old thing and doing it in the new realm, right? So collective thinking, things like that. And my God, do we need it? That kind of stuff. I mean, in the same way, Twitter is a hive mind, right? So I'm a sports fan. I love the Boston Celtics. I love it when the Celtics do something good or bad. I go to Twitter and I see everybody with every shade. I think there will have to be, and there will be ways that we can. Here's the thing I say. We can't think together as a species. Can we work together? Yes, because there's a word, collaboration. What about, can we spread information, communication? There's no word co-cogitation. We don't have it because we can't think together. Like even the three of us right now, we're talking, right? But there's no shared model of not even what we're saying, let alone what we're thinking, right? So I think co-cogitation, hot take. I think co-cogitation is going to be something that's going to be very important. That's one. I don't know if that fits the bill of the weird thing.
So are you first in line then for Elon's NeuralLink? Oh,
of course. I'm following that. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I always say this, I don't know if this matters, but like I'm an Irish person with ADD, which means we have no filter at all. Right? It's terrifying. Yep. If you're married to me,
I can relate.
What's that?
I can relate.
Are you Irish too?
I am, yeah.
There we go.
My name's Erin. So, I mean, what do you expect?
You know what I mean, right? So the reason I bring that up is like, part of me wants to say, well, yeah, NeuralLink, like I would really have to think seriously about that. But the other part of me is like, yeah, let's do it. I want to see if I can move that. I want to see if I can Yoda that ship up into the air. Right? So, I'd have to get my family and wife and doggy to sign off. But I mean, I'm excited about it because I know it's going to happen. And I also know, just being a person, always loved innovation because I've studied it. Everything freaks people out at first. The car, we know this. Oh, it's smelly and this, and the printing press is going to spread the Satan's whatever. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. My short answer is yeah, probably. I don't know. What about you guys? I mean, if it's available, you're not going to say no, right?
Man,
if I could type just as a serious aside, So do you know voice recognition and transcription? Otter is a good one. I use Otter, it's called, right? It's okay, but somehow it's just not, I use it a decent amount, but someone's like, oh, I can't say move this paragraph here. And if I could think the words on the page, I mean, I'm doing it tomorrow. I mean, unless there's a danger that chromium is going to leak through my brain. If it's safe, I think, anyway, you were going to say something. I would consider it. Yeah.
I tell you, Bill, literally less than 24 hours from right now, I'm getting LASIK surgery. So I'm going to say, while you're in there cutting around, just slap in an Apple M1 chip or something. I don't know.
Just order the part before I get there for my LASIK.
Exactly.
Pop an M1 in there. Yeah.
And I think when it comes to our personal lives, it's easy to be like, yes, I'm going to do that. I think it gets harder when we start intersecting with what you talked about earlier. When you care about people, that's who you're innovating for. So there's this level of care, especially around the work I think Dustin and I are doing in terms of educating humans, of this ethical look into it and how does that impact bigger things. But I think we have to balance not being so afraid of it that we don't engage in it at all and then getting left behind, because that's the reality. Higher ed's going to get left behind if they sit in this space of I'm not going to engage with this because I don't know how it's going to impact people.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to whack higher education and the medical industry, but I mean, just to be more benign about it, as we know, the pandemic has sped things up greatly. So and there is with healthcare and education, you're really dealing with life and death and young minds developing. I understand but on the other hand, that imagining on their behalf, that's why I like that phrase. I've come to hate the phrase disruption, because you're always, who are you disrupting?
Just us.
Just you guys, right? Yeah. I mean, think of it, Airbnb, could you say they were disruptive? Of course. That's not how they think of it, though. They were imagining on people's behalf. They were, you know what I mean? I just think that way is nicer, but so that's why I think it's encouraging to work with Maryville specifically, because everyone from the president and Jeff Miller and the people I've worked with, there's this openness to I mean, it's not even to go out on a limb. It's so we talked about the metaverse with you guys, right? It's sometimes I've learned with executives, not at Maryville though, but with other executives, to sort of tiptoe around and say, that you might want to look into this metaverse, but hot take, it's coming, it's here, the metaverse is here. Okay. So it's it's going to happen. If you read Snow Crash from Neil Stephenson, 1992, it's or if you have William Gibson's, not Idoru, but Neuromancer in 84, it's not that hard to see what's coming, I don't think. And so the more this stuff becomes real, the more education kind of falls behind, I think. And look, that is why there are structural, tectonic movements of you read in the New York Times, students don't want to pay $80,000 a year anymore. And where's all the money going? That stuff is not only negligence on leadership and higher ed in general. That's the sense of that in every other part of their life. Students are getting tofu delivered by drone. They're getting every type of shoe. They're trying on clothes online. And then they're like, what's happening in higher ed? So part of it is that falling behind contextually makes you look kind of bad, and that's, again, I'm very happy to work with Maryville. And I do think the pandemic has shook a few people loose in education. I mean, I was at a conference in Boston in 1993. I was working with the publishing company Houghton Mifflin, right? And I remember we were talking about, education will probably be an export of Massachusetts at some point. And even then I was like, that'll be whenever I squinted. I was like, whenever you could shoot images and stuff, that'll be an export. And it's I'm not even in the field, so it's why is that clear to me 30 years ago, So that's the I'll call that a soft landing. Again, we are, Maryville is, if we keep going on the path we've been talking, Maryville will be a leader in the metaverse. And it's on the one hand, oh God, a leader. And on the other hand, I'm like, oh God, I was building websites early. It's calm down, people at Nike or wherever. It's a web. It's going to be fine, So that's yeah. I don't know what we've gotten happily lost in this discussion, but I think it's something about risk versus imagination, right?
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. This has been super fun. And a new question we're adding for our guest, which I'm really excited about, is this challenge of who do you think should be on Disrupt You? So who do you know that's innovating, especially maybe in the lens or the lane of education?
Oh, who's innovating in education, you're saying?
Yeah.
Or you
Or
said
in general. Who should be on our podcast?
Oh, well, someone that President Lombardi knows, Paul LeBlanc, University of Southern New Hampshire. Yeah, you should check him out. I knew him from the Houghton Mifflin days. Yeah, he's a very, that's the obvious one. He's really, he's done a lot of online learning. Check him out. Paul LeBlanc is one guy. The other thing is Minerva School in San Francisco. You could get the CEO of that. Do you know Minerva School? It's got no physical place, right? Mm-hmm. One of my interns and someone I've hired a lot graduated from there. So actually, it's funny. Paul LeBlanc did innovate, and I don't know if he's changed what he's doing a lot in the last 5 or 10 years, but certainly he has been an innovator. Minerva is innovating right now. I mean, you should got to talk to those guys, because their whole thing is, I mean, I've talked to President Lombardi about this. Their whole thing is predicated on no physical space. And it is just about, they almost went tabula rasa and built it from scratch to fit the this age. So I would talk to those guys. Let's see, what other cliche? Khan Academy is a cliche. We all kind of know about that, right? Have you had the Soul Machines people on? You should think about that, because you guys have worked with them for a while, right? Yeah. I would think about, you should invite Greg Cross, the CEO of Soul Machines, on, because one of the first things he said to me that got me interested in working with Soul Machines as an advocate is he basically said what I said at the beginning of this, like with healthcare and education, it's a scaling problem. It's almost like with healthcare, we have to scale expertise and care, like the corazon, right? And same thing with education. So I might have him on as well. But the first thing would be those Minerva people. Yeah. And I'm connected to the founder on LinkedIn. I think I've sent him a note saying congrats, and he wrote back, yes, you exist. Those emails back. So, is that what you're looking for?
That's great.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And Greg Cross, he has the same accent that my grandmother had. She, yes, she lived there her entire, until she married my grandfather and came to the States. Oh. So whenever I talk to him, I'm just like, I just want to listen more. So that's a perfect, but as I told you, I'm Irish. So my grandmother must have been her family must have been Irish prisoners at some point. We know they were into some sort of sketchy business. So, but yes, let
me think. Anyone else? So
all of those are great options.
Yeah, Greg would be good. Minerva, Paul LeBlanc will talk to you. So sort of like innovators in education, right? Yep. Yeah,
I love it.
Anything else? Yeah, those are good, right? Okay, yeah.
Well, Bill, I want to ask you our final question that we always end every podcast with. But first, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
It's been a great dive. I'm ready to get the NeuralLink right in the head. So here's the final question. So Disrupt You, what we're gonna buy you your own Super Bowl commercial. We bought it for you, $5 million for the Super Bowl commercial. You can use that Super Bowl commercial to send any message you want, but you can't say hire me or Soul Machines, right? You can't. It has to be a passion. What are you going to sell? What message are you going to put out there in your Super Bowl commercial?
That's a great question. And it's a classic 30-second spot kind of thing, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess my short answer would be, it's a very good question. And by the way, I'm not just being polite. When people ask those kind of like what if questions, I usually don't like them. It's like, whatever, spirit animal, I don't know. But no, I like this one a lot. It's making me think. I think my answer would be, first I was going to say sort of a very cool 30-second film that highlights what is going to happen with technology, like what the world will look like. But then my second thought was, I would do a short little like Apple 1984, like little, I'm sorry, it's my dog. I would do a film about the future of work and what it would look like. I came up with this term just this morning. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. We're talking about, is it going to be a utopia? Is it going to be a dystopia? I think we're heading for is a duotopia, which is both. And we are absolutely in a duotopia, and it's getting more duotopian, if I will, right? So and I can talk about that too. I think that's actually a useful phrase, but I would do 30 seconds on something about the tech is coming. Here's how it'll change things. This is what it looks like when everybody's on the boat, and it might, this is probably, I'd have to pay for a minute, but it would probably involve universal basic income or whatever that means. Like, what would it look like if we did the future of work right? And my corny tagline would be like, making the future of work for everyone. So that's what I would do, because to me, again, it's tautological what is going to happen and what could happen. I can sort of see that clearly. The thing that's indeterminate is, are we going to make this for everybody? So, and it's not just me being like Hallmark. I really think that it's ethically incumbent upon people like us who are like on the inner circle of technology to think about that. And that's what I would put in my commercial. And by the way, I might do that now. Not the Super Bowl part, but that's a good idea.
We'll pay Andrew Yang to be in the commercial as well, right? He can be a voice to that future.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks for listening to Disrupt You. Have a question for the host? Just send that over to Dr. York via Twitter at Prof. D. York, and it could be featured on the show. We'll see you next week for another dive into the future of higher education.